Well, hey friends, today we are talking with my friend Miles Och, who works as a motion designer at Eagle Brook Church, and we just finished an amazing Easter film. It's the opener for their service at Eagle Brook. We worked on it together. It's an animated short that I illustrated and that Miles animated. I can't wait to show you this. So today we're going to talk about working together, this particular film, and how animators and illustrators can best work together to make the project as seamless as possible. So I painted all the illustrations in Photoshop, and then I gave them to Miles. He took them into After Effects, animated them, then went into Cinema 4D. There was even more animation done like holistically to make the whole film, and then it was brought into Premiere, where it was edited and put together. So there's a chain of programs and knowledge that it takes to put something like this together. So this film was an opener for Easter morning, where it brought you through Good Friday, a little bit about who the Lord was and some flashbacks to him as a child, through the cross, and ultimately to Easter morning, which is the celebration and why we're here today. I'll have a link to the whole film down in the description where you can check out what was broadcast at Eagle Brook, but also Miles's director's cut. Make sure to check out Miles's YouTube channel where he started uploading some of the projects that we've worked on in the past, and of course this one that we're talking about today. Miles, it's really cool to have you here with us today. So why don't you tell me about yourself and your position at Eagle Brook?
My name is Miles Och. I am a motion designer at Eagle Brook Church. Kind of varies of a wide variety of different things I got to do. I got to do animation, visual effects work, and got to do stuff for kids, for like teenagers, and then adults as well. So it's a fun job that I have.
Let's talk a little bit about the project that we had today, and how you came up with it. Maybe how you imagined what it could be. And just why don't you just kind of tell me a little bit about what we just finished working on together?
I was given a very kind of rough script. The music team had a song that they wanted. So they had the song, and they kind of had like a section A, B, C, and D and whatnot. And they kind of said, this is roughly what we want in these areas. And also in the previous years, they thought that the openers were a little too abstract. So they had, their feedback was like, let's make this more straightforward, like simple and to the point, and just straight up tell the story of Jesus. Tried to focus on the basic story, right, and then just trying to get as much emotion from that to make it as impactful as possible.
Let's talk a little bit about kind of how this all worked a little bit. So okay. Miles came up with a script and some thumbnails of what he wanted each painting to look like, even a color palette, which was really helpful. And then along with the script, and even kind of a basic animatic of what the whole piece would look like. Mm-hmm. And then we used Basecamp to post our images and talk about them kind of back and forth in the sketch phase, drawing, and then final illustration. And then, of course, Miles took that, and in After Effects, right? You started in After Effects and animated the...
Yeah, I animated your illustration.
Yeah, you animated it, and then you eventually brought it into
Cinema 4D.
Cinema 4D to kind of put everything together. Yeah. So how I set up the files was really kind of important for your animation. We'll kind of talk about that a little bit too as we get going here. But one of the things that that struck me early on was, what was it like? I mean, for me, I felt it was a little difficult to paint the Lord on the cross or his suffering. What was that like for you to animate that?
Yeah, I think this kind of hits everyone differently. Like some people, it hits others more than others. I tend to be like a heads down, straightforward kind of guy where sure, I don't let myself get too like sucked into it. And But there were definitely times of this where it hit me. Like there's a certain shot that we did where Jesus is up on the cross, and then you see a hammer like coming to like hit the nail
Yeah.
On him. And when I was first animating that, my whole idea is I wanted to actually have the hammer hit. And then so I animated that, and I'm like, okay, now how can I add more life to this? So I had Jesus like twitch, like you
Yeah.
can have him feel
Yes, I
like you'll
remember
see
that
him
part.
feel like feeling the
Actually
pain.
move. Yeah.
And then once I was done with the whole animation, I just like stepped back. I'm just like my eyes got big. I was like, this is this is too much. This is,
Hmm.
I mean, the reality of what it was,
Right.
it is far worse and like more painful than what we can actually show.
Yeah.
So I ended up getting a group of people in here just to make sure, like, and like that this is okay to show or not. And they came in and were like, yeah, that's too much.
That's a little too much.
Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
lot of cringing, and so found different ways, creative, had to find creative ways to show that. So
Yeah.
instead of it hitting the nail, we had it where um, right as it was getting close to the nail, the hammer was getting close to the nail, the page flipped. So you knew what was going to happen, but you didn't have to deal with
Right. And
the
that
hard.
kind of became a something we talked a lot about in the project. Are we going to show dripping blood or dripping sweat? How did you and the team decide where the line is between what really happened, and then also making it appropriate for a family service? And how did that come about? How did you make those kind of decisions?
Yeah, it's tricky. I I mean, culture is so totally fine with blood and everything these days. So it's easy to just go and be like, oh yeah, let's have blood. And um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I thought it was important to make sure to go and get other people's opinions. So I
Sure.
kind of just walked around. Like there were, I mean, I'm on a creative team with other like filmmakers and animators and you know graphic designers. So I asked some of them about their thoughts on it, and then I also made sure to go and talk to other people, like some musicians, and um, just so I have a variety of
Mm,
voices. And
yeah.
I feel like the blood, there's such a fine line of what's okay and what's not, and there was enough people where it just like probably too much that I was like,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna risk it.
Like how did we get from this idea all the way to the end? Can you kind of summarize it for us?
Yeah, I mean, I received the basic script where none of the like ideas of what visually would be happening were there. So I kind of looked online for inspiration, and that's usually where I go. Is I'm not the greatest at just picking a starting place off in
Yeah.
my mind. So I searched online, just a whole bunch of different artists. Um, And one thing that I have been wanting to do for a long time is like, um, have you ever seen the artwork for like League of Legends?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it's just really great
Yeah.
animated still illustrations. So I found an animator named Anthony. I think his last name is Pasabon. I'm probably butchering the last name, but he's got a YouTube channel where he shows like how to animate in that style, and he's actually been one of the animators for League of Legends.
Oh, okay, sure. Yeah.
So I watched some of his stuff and I was like, oh, this could really work for this project. I went from there, I had that kind of style that I wanted to go for, and then created a rough storyboard, kind of just drew up how I imagined the shots being, and then turned that into an animatic. And then I had to go and find an illustrator, which
Yeah.
is pretty difficult. And I'm so glad one of my coworkers remembered you. So I reached out to you, and so glad I got you on this
Right.
project.
Well, and for our viewers, so Miles and I had worked on a project, what, 2017 maybe,
17 or 16, yeah.
something like that. And it was called The Way of Wisdom.
Yeah.
And I'll link some of those to Miles's channel where you can take a look at kind of what we worked on before back then. So that's kind of how we got introduced to each other. Yeah.
Yeah. And that one, I actually don't think I ever talked to you. I think our creative director at the time,
right.
was working with you, and then I was just given the illustrations for that.
Right. Yeah.
So it was nice
So we didn't get to interact at all. I remember that. Yeah. This one we actually got to work closer together. Right. Yeah.
So then I thought, I got you as illustrator, and then in the meantime, like I'd have you work on like a first set of shots. We kind of broke it out into sections. Actually, before we broke it out into sections, I had you do like a hero shot for like how, like, to really show what we're going for. So like put a lot of attention and detail to that, to use as reference for the rest of the project. So I had you start working on the first section of illustrations then, and then I went and I textured and lit the book rig and the environment in Cinema 4D. And then as you kind of brought in the illustrations, we'd get feedback and get it to where it needed to be. I'd animate them and then put them into the book that I made in Cinema 4D. And then I'd have to render that out from Cinema and bring it into After Effects again, and just do kind of some finishing touches and compositing to help the focus of the camera.
Wow, I didn't realize that you actually went back into After Effects. Wow. Okay.
Effects. Did some, just help give focus, because there was a lot of times where like you'd be looking and it's like, oh, am I looking at this person? Am I looking at this person? Like, so I kind of did some slight blurring and vignetting to kind of help focus the eye. Did some basic color correction. And then I rendered that out and then brought it into Premiere for the edit.
Sure. There's a lot of moving parts, and one of the things that Miles and I talked about early on was that we had to, we couldn't just do all illustrations and then he would start animating. We had to do it in sections because first of all, animation takes a long time, and then also the rendering would take a long time. So we had to kind of do it in these groups. I think there were maybe 5 or 6 pieces in a group to make it work. So there's a lot of steps that have to work together to make it work, right?
For sure. Yeah. And like each individual illustration, it would take probably 4 or 5 hours to animate, which isn't that bad. But then you place it in the book, and then you have to render that section out, and then it takes 8 to 12 hours per shot to render out of the book. And so I would often let that render overnight while I was gone. And we definitely found ways to overlap our work as much as possible, because if it was you doing all the illustration at once and then it would be me animating, that we wouldn't have been able to get it done in time.
No. It would have been different if we would have known further in advance, but we had to, when we kind of got together and decided it, that was what we had to do to make it work, right? Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. One of the things I really liked about this piece was your color palette that you chose. And as an artist, I actually really like being given that. And some people are like, well, don't you just want complete freedom? And it's like, no, I really love to work within parameters that help bring direction and focus and emotion. So tell me how'd you come up with the color palette, and why did you choose those colors?
So that went back to my inspiration. When I was looking for inspiration online, there was a shot of I think it was a League of Legends shot where One of the characters was like holding a teddy bear or something, and there's like fire behind her, and it was like very like intentional but minimalistic lighting. And I just loved the way that it looked. Like it was very emotional and powerful. Um, so I ended up looking at the colors for that one and grabbed like the three main colors that we used from that.
Sure.
And then from there, I added other ones that would help it work for the entire project. Because we didn't want everything to be like dark and red, like the whole first section, where we have a lot of reds and blues. So then I added like the yellows and green and orange in there as well.
Sure.
But didn't have to, the color palette was actually one of the easier things.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think it's one of the pieces that, even though maybe it was easy to put together, I think it really helped make the piece powerful to have that thread as well that kind of tied everything together. Yeah. No, that was really cool. Now you showed me a little bit of what you've done in the past for Easter, and there was some 3D work that you've done.
Yeah.
Now this project that we worked on combines 2D and 3D together. Do you have a preference what you like working on?
It honestly depends on what it is.
Sure.
I love doing a lot of character animation, but I think what's more important is like what it's for. Like, what do you want out of it in the end? Because like 3D work, there's so many things to adjust, and there's a lot more variables that can go wrong. And if just one is wrong, it can really throw everything off. I mean, like having a character with emotion in 3D and have it be like realistic is, I mean, you have to have a large team on that. And like, I mean, it works for like Pixar and whatnot. I mean, and I'm sure there's probably a couple artists around the world that can do that, but it's very difficult to get right and have the nice raw emotion. So when it comes to like being able to nail that, I think 2D is definitely the way to go.
Tell us a little bit about, I mean, because we prepared the illustrations in a really specific way. Why don't you walk everybody through kind of what's the philosophy of how we prepared the illustrations so that they worked for animation?
I really wanted to focus on like stuff blowing in the wind in this one. And so for instance, the hair, like I had you like have the head and then do like a base hair layer and then break up the hair into like different elements. So I have you like have like one main piece of hair and then like the secondary hairs go in there as well, all on separate layers. Illustrating for animation, you have to think about what's behind every element. And you have to think about those things because once they move, like there's got to be content there, which the animator, you know, if they know how to like patch that up, can do that. Like I ended up doing the clone stamp quite a few times, but you weren't able to really tell. But and
that concept, I didn't really start catching on exactly what that meant really until further along in the process.
For sure.
Where it was like, well, how much this stuff is going to move, you know, and how much do I need to paint under this?
For sure.
You know, but I think one of the things that if any illustrators out there who are doing any projects for animations is to at least get something, even if it's just a flat color under your layers that are moving. I think that would be really, really helpful. And that was kind of a learning piece for me, was to figure out what was the best way to make the most of the time that we're working on these projects. Like we didn't want to spend a bunch of time painting something that's never going to be shown, but then at the same time, we didn't want to paint something that is not, we're going to end up with those blank spots. Yeah.
Yeah, we for the most part, I was able to do the clone tool, stamp tool to cover up some areas, and then I think I had a couple times where I asked you to go and put little extra detail in. Like
Mm-hmm.
one was for an arm that was moving.
Yeah.
Typically, like for if you're gonna do a lot like a character that is rigged up, you would break the arm. Like I'm gonna kind of move here.
Sure.
So you'd have the arm. You wouldn't just have this be like one whole piece. You'd break the arm and you'd draw this whole section. So it's like one shape. And then you would draw the other part of the arm, like here, as a whole nother shape, where then you can overlap them and have them
Right.
rotate smoothly.
That specifically was really helpful on like the piece with the lady kneeling
Yeah.
in front of the cross. Yeah. What advice would you have in general for illustrators who are looking to work with animators, or maybe they're, watching this video and they're about to work on a piece with an animator? What would be some advice that would make it as easy as possible for the animator?
Ask the animator what they're going to animate. As much detail as you can get about what they're going to animate in the piece that you are going to be working on, the better, because then you know what needs to be broken up as you go, so you won't draw like an individual element. I mean, like a whole body, and then have to break it up afterwards. Like it'd be a lot smoother if, like for the hair, like that you would just draw the head and then draw the hair as different pieces, as opposed to drawing the whole head with the hair and then having to like use some kind of selection tool to take it apart and put it into different layers from there. So yeah, it depends on what you're working on, but really ask your animator what they're going to animate beforehand, because that'll save a lot of time.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Well, this was a pretty special project for me, and I'm really excited that now it's out. I mean, it was for Easter Sunday.
Sure.
We'll be I'll definitely link you can see the whole thing in the description below so that you guys can check it out. But Miles, thanks for taking time today to chat about this project and a little bit about what's going on behind the scenes. And it was a super fun working with you, and I hope we get another project here pretty soon to work together.
Sure.
That would be great. So thank you so much for watching, and I really hope that you enjoyed my chat with Miles today as we talked about illustrators and animators working together. Remember that you are loved and that you are valuable, and I look forward to talking to you soon. Take care.